You've probably noticed something disturbing. When you try to share your awakening experience, people don't just misunderstand. They actively resist understanding. Their eyes glaze over. They change the subject. They dismiss you with a smile and a platitude. It's not that they can't understand. It's that they don't want to. Carl Jung made a shocking discovery. Society's failure to understand awakened individuals isn't accidental. It's intentional, not consciously intentional, but systematically, structurally, unconsciously intentional. Because awakened people represent something that threatens the entire social order. And that threat must be neutralized, discredited, or ignored. Today I'm revealing why Jung believes society has a vested interest in not understanding awakened people, why this resistance is built into the fabric of collective consciousness, and what this means for anyone walking the path of individuation. This isn't paranoia, it's psychology. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's what changes everything. Jung discovered that society isn't neutral about consciousness. It has a preference, and that preference is unconsciousness. Not because individual people are malicious, but because the entire social structure requires a certain level of unconsciousness to function. Awakened people disrupt that structure simply by being awake. Think about what society actually is. A collective agreement to believe certain things, value certain things, ignore certain things. It's a shared trance, and that trance only works if everyone participates. The moment someone wakes up from the trance, they become a threat to everyone still sleeping. Jung called this the tyranny of the collective, and he observed that awakened individuals don't just face misunderstanding, they face systematic resistance from every level of society. Family systems, social groups, institutions, culture itself, all unconsciously conspire to keep awakened people from being understood, because understanding them would require waking up. And society doesn't want to wake up. The first reason why might shock you. Jung's first insight. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because awakened people expose the collective delusion that society is built on, and no system willingly examines the lies it's founded upon. Every society operates on agreed-upon fictions. Money has value, status matters. Success looks like this. Happiness comes from that. These aren't truths, they're collective beliefs that everyone agrees to treat as truth. The entire social structure depends on people believing these fictions without questioning them. But awakened people have seen through the fictions. They've recognized money as an agreement, status as an illusion, success as a construction, happiness as an inside job. They're not playing the game anymore, not because they're superior, but because they can see it's a game. One of Jung's patients, a former executive, described what happened when he awakened. I was in a board meeting discussing quarterly profits, and suddenly I saw it clearly. We were all pretending these numbers mattered cosmically. Everyone was playing their role in a fiction we'd collectively agreed was real. When I tried to name this, even gently, people looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Because I'd broken the first rule. Don't acknowledge it's a game. This is what Jung meant by the collective delusion. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because understanding them would mean acknowledging the delusion. And the delusion is load-bearing. Remove it, and the entire structure collapses. You'll notice that when you try to share your awakening insights, people don't engage with the content. They deflect, dismiss, or diagnose. You're overthinking. You're going through a phase. Have you talked to someone? They're not responding to what you're saying. They're defending against it. Because what you're saying threatens the foundation of their reality. Jung observed that societies throughout history have consistently marginalized, pathologized, or persecuted awakened individuals, not because these individuals were dangerous, but because their consciousness was contagious. If one person wakes up and others start listening, the collective trance weakens. So, society's immune system activates, and that immune system is rejection, dismissal, and misunderstanding. But there's a second reason society resists understanding awakened people, and it's even more threatening to the social order. This is Jung's most politically radical insight. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because awakened people can't be controlled. And every social system is ultimately about control. Think about how society maintains order through fear of consequences, promise of rewards, social pressure, approval and disapproval, status hierarchies, economic incentives. All of these control mechanisms work on unconscious people, but they don't work on awakened people. An awakened person doesn't fear loss of status. They've seen through status. Doesn't crave social approval. They've found internal validation. Doesn't chase material success. They've recognized the emptiness of acquisition. Doesn't conform to avoid rejection. They've accepted aloneness. They're psychologically unemployable by the systems that run society. Jung treated a woman who'd awakened and subsequently couldn't maintain her role in her corporate job, her social circle, or even her family system. She described it. I wasn't rebelling. I wasn't trying to be difficult. But every system I was part of required me to value things I could no longer value, fear things I no longer feared, want things I no longer wanted. I'd become ungovernable, not through defiance but through consciousness. And every system expelled me like a foreign body. This is what Jung called the uncontrollability of the awakened. They're not antisocial, they're asocial, not opposed to society's rules but simply operating from a different foundation. And this is terrifying to power structures that depend on compliance. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because understanding them would mean recognizing that the control mechanisms are arbitrary, that people could live differently, that there's an escape from the matrix of manipulation. This recognition would undermine every institution that depends on unconscious compliance. You'll notice that when awakened people try to explain their perspective, they're often labeled crazy, selfish, irresponsible, lost, having a crisis. These labels serve a function. They discredit the awakened person's consciousness and warn others not to follow. The message is clear. Wake up and we'll pathologize you. Jung observed that throughout history, awakened individuals were either contained in monasteries, ashrams, isolated communities, or pathologized as mad, heretical, dangerous. Never understood, because understanding would validate an alternative to unconscious participation, and that alternative threatens everything. But if you think threatening power structures is the deepest reason for society's resistance, Jung discovered something even more fundamental. Here's what Jung understood. That explains everything. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because understanding them would require becoming conscious. And consciousness is painful, and society will choose comfort over consciousness every single time. You can't understand an awakened person from an unconscious state. It's impossible. Like trying to understand calculus when you only know addition. The concepts exist in a dimension of awareness you haven't accessed yet. To understand the awakened, you'd have to become awakened, at least partially. And that requires facing everything you've been avoiding. Your shadow, your unlived life, your compromises, your self-betrayals, your comfortable lies, your false identity, your wasted time, your wrong turns, your cowardice, your complicity. Awakening means confronting all of it, and most people will do anything to avoid that confrontation. Jung worked with a man whose friends actively avoided him after his awakening, not through cruelty, through discomfort. One friend finally admitted, "When I'm around you now, I feel something stirring in me that I don't want to feel, like you're reminding me of a life I'm not living. It's easier not to see you than to feel that every time we talk." This is the truth society won't speak. Awakened people are mirrors. They reflect back the unlived potential in everyone around them, the consciousness that could be developed but isn't, the freedom that could be claimed but isn't, the authenticity that could be embodied but isn't. And people don't want to see what they're avoiding. So society doesn't understand awakened people because understanding would require looking in that mirror. And most people's entire life structure is built on not looking. Their relationships, their careers, their identities, all constructed on the foundation of selective unconsciousness. To understand the awakened would mean dismantling that foundation. You'll notice people get uncomfortable around awakened individuals without knowing why. They feel judged even when no judgment is happening. They feel exposed even when nothing is being revealed. The awakened person's presence alone triggers the uncomfortable recognition of their own unconsciousness. Jung called this the intolerance of consciousness. It's not that people hate awakened individuals. They hate what awakened individuals make them feel about themselves. And society, being composed of mostly unconscious people, systematically organizes itself to avoid that feeling. But there's one final reason Jung identified that might be the most important of all. If you've felt society's resistance to understanding you, if you've experienced the dismissal and pathologizing, if you've wondered why people refuse to even try to comprehend your experience, Jung would say you're not imagining it. This resistance is real, systematic, and necessary for society to maintain itself. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Now, this final reason reveals why this resistance might actually be protecting something crucial. This is Jung's ultimate insight. Society doesn't want to understand awakened people because if it did, if awakened consciousness became widespread, the entire current paradigm would collapse. And society is more invested in preserving the paradigm than in evolution. Imagine what would happen if even 20% of the population awakened. They'd stop chasing status, so hierarchies would lose meaning. They'd stop consuming mindlessly, so the economy would transform. They'd stop believing propaganda, so political manipulation would fail. They'd stop seeking external validation, so social media would die. They'd stop sacrificing their lives for corporations, so the employment system would have to change. Literally every institution would have to reorganize around conscious humans instead of unconscious consumers, workers, voters, believers. The entire structure of society would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. And the people currently benefiting from the unconscious system have no interest in that transformation. Jung observed this resistance not just in his time, but throughout history. Awakened teachers, Buddha, Jesus, Socrates, countless others, were either killed, exiled, or their teachings were domesticated and neutered. Because undomesticated awakening is revolutionary. It doesn't call for political revolution. It makes political revolution inevitable by removing the foundation of unconscious compliance. One of Jung's patients, a journalist, described trying to write about awakening for mainstream publications. Every editor wanted the sanitized version, the feel-good spirituality that didn't threaten anything. The moment I wrote about the actual implications of mass awakening, the collapse of current systems, the obsolescence of current values, they killed the piece. They wanted awakening as self-help, not as system change. This is what Jung meant by the containment of consciousness. Society will tolerate awakening in small doses, in controlled environments, in defanged versions. Meditation apps, self-help books, wellness retreats. As long as awakening stays safely contained in the spiritual marketplace and doesn't actually threaten the system, it's allowed, even encouraged, because it can be commodified. But real awakening, the kind that makes people ungovernable, uncontrollable, unable to participate in collective unconsciousness, that's dangerous. And society doesn't want to understand it because understanding it would mean recognizing its revolutionary implications. Jung was clear. Awakened individuals aren't trying to overthrow society. They're not political revolutionaries. But their very existence is revolutionary because they prove that another way of being is possible. And that proof is the greatest threat to any system based on unconsciousness. Why society doesn't want to understand spiritually awakened people? Because awakened people expose the collective delusion society is built on. Because awakened people can't be controlled by the usual mechanisms. Because understanding awakened people requires becoming conscious, which is painful. Because mass awakening would collapse the current paradigm entirely. Jung would want you to understand. This isn't a conspiracy. There's no shadowy group preventing awakening. It's systemic unconsciousness, protecting itself through every individual who chooses comfort over consciousness, through every institution that requires compliance, through every social structure built on shared delusion. The resistance you face isn't personal, it's archetypal. It's the collective unconscious defending itself against consciousness. It's happened to every awakened person throughout history. You're not alone in experiencing this. You're part of a pattern as old as consciousness itself. Society's refusal to understand you isn't about you being unclear or doing something wrong. It's about society being invested in not understanding, and recognizing this can free you from the painful belief that if you just explained it better, people would get it. They won't. Not because they can't, because they don't want to. If you've been trying to make society understand your awakening, Jung would say, stop. You're trying to wake people who are choosing sleep. You're offering consciousness to systems that require unconsciousness. You're speaking a language that society has systematically deafened itself to hearing. This doesn't mean hide your light. It doesn't mean stop being authentic. It means stop expecting society to understand or validate your awakening. Stop needing the collective to see what you see. Stop waiting for permission or recognition from systems that are threatened by what you've become. Find the others, the small percentage who are also awake or waking. Build conscious communities. Create alternative structures. Live your truth without needing society to comprehend it. Jung believed that's how transformation happens. Not through converting the masses, but through awakened individuals finding each other and creating something new. Society doesn't want to understand you, but that's not your problem. Your job is to stay awake despite the pressure to go back to sleep, to remain conscious despite the collective invitation to unconsciousness, to keep walking your path even when the world tells you you're lost. The world won't understand until it has to. Until enough people awaken that the current paradigm becomes unsustainable, until consciousness becomes more attractive than unconsciousness. Until then, you're a pioneer in hostile territory. Accept that, and keep walking anyway. Subscribe to explore Jung's insights on staying conscious in an unconscious world. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.